Hello, everybody. My name is Seviano Manalo, and I want to talk in today's video about chronic pain and neuroplasticity and ableism. And hold on a second. Let me just okay. All right. So first, I want to tell you a little bit about my own chronic pain journey. I developed chronic pain in high school. I was 17, and I woke up one day and my wrists were just on fire. It felt like, literally, like my wrists were, and my arms and my were on fire, and I had no idea how this happened. And I was, as many people who come down with chronic pain, I was panicking. Up to this point, I had no chronic pain in my life. I didn't know what this world, this alternate reality that I'd, somehow found myself in. I had no idea it existed. And, like a lot of people who don't have chronic pain, I just never thought about it. Although now that I think about it, that's not entirely true. I did see, when I was 12 years old, I saw a special on, I happened to walk into the room, my parents were watching this, I think it was like a special maybe on chronic pain, but I was 12 years old, and I found the program so disturbing that I had to walk out of the room. But anyways, but so I developed chronic pain, and I went the conventional route to begin with. I went to a neurologist. I had a nerve conduction study, and it did show a slowdown in my ulnar nerve. So I was told to, prop up the elbow and support it and stuff. And then I was fortunate enough to find this medical dentist who treated me. It was very expensive treatment. My parents had to pay out of pocket, but I credit this treatment with saving my life. I was suicidal when I walked into this guy's office, and I walked out very skeptical. We didn't actually begin the treatment until the next visit. So I was like, oh my God, if this doesn't work, I don't know what I'm going to do. My pain in my arms and wrists was so bad that I wanted to end it all. I wanted to die. And so, but I thought to myself, just give this a shot. It might work. And when I went in the next time, he made the appliances that were put in my mouth, and I put them in, and it was like a miracle. Literally, it was like a miracle. My chronic pain it felt like more than a year. My chronic pain disappeared. Literally, I had my wrists and arms back. I could do stuff again. And so that treatment, when I was in that treatment for a good almost 10 years, and it was very effective. And I was able to move out into my own apartment, but the stress of moving caused, well, actually, I was able to move out into my own apartment, and then when I was lying in bed one day, I did something weird to one of my fingers, and I felt a lot of joint pain in it. And at that time, I was seeing a cranial sacral therapist, and so she recommended that I wrap my fingers. I forget what I wrapped them in. I think it was that I use one of those over-the-counter pain relievers. I forget what it's called, but that I wrap they were in soft gels, and my caretakers would open up the gel for me, and they would wrap my fingers in the joint that was hurting. And that did seem to help. And so, but the joint pain got worse and began to spread to other parts of my body. And so I went to my primary care physician again, and I had x-rays. They found no evidence of arthritis. I had a blood test. My blood tests all came up negative. And so we really didn't know what was going on at this point. neither my parents nor me knew what was going on. And I had this mysterious joint pain. And so I ended up being diagnosed with fibromyalgia, even though my experience of fibromyalgia is very different from most people's. I don't have pain all the time, but when I do have joint pain, it's pretty bad. And I'm on a dose of Cymbalta, or duloxetine, the generic for Cymbalta. And I had to be put on that because my joint pain became so bad that I was unable to use my cane when I would go out for my walks around my neighborhood. And I'm visually impaired, and visually impaired people use canes to let cars and other cars know when they're going to be crossing the street. And I couldn't use my cane without pain, so I had to walk with my caretakers every day. And I was frustrated. I felt like my quality of life was going way downhill. And so I called my doctor, and I was like, look, I want to try a drug for my chronic pain. It's this bad. And so he agreed to, ultimately we tried Lyrica, and let's just say that really didn't work. But then he put me on Cymbalta, and my chronic pain has been under control, and I've been able to go and take my walks again, and I've been able to have a quality of life that is good. And so that's my chronic pain story. And now I want to get into describing neuroplasticity and ableism. And I want to point out that actually part of my chronic pain story is that I went into therapy, and my therapist recommended the neuroplastic approach for chronic pain. And so I was really skeptical. And it took me a while to finally try this approach. And so I tried. She referred me to a neuroplastic healing teacher who she used to be a family doctor. Anyways, and so I was really skeptical, but I said, you know what? I got nothing to lose. And I finally motivated. I got the motivation to try this and give it an honest shot. And I want to start with the positives of neuroplasticity first, because there is a lot of science to back it up. And it is a powerful technique, and it does work. So just for the basics of neuroplasticity is that every experience you have in life, your brain creates new neural pathways. And it lays down the experience in memory. And so the way neuroplasticity works with chronic pain is that when you get chronic pain, your brain amplifies your pain states. You have areas of your brain in the limbic system in particular, which amplify pain states. And pain can be, with a person in chronic pain, there can be pain in the absence of tissue damage, which is my case. I didn't have any arthritis. I didn't have any physical reason for my pain, for my joint pain. And so in this program, I was learning how to use a variety of techniques to help to rewire my brain. And one of the techniques was to visualize the pain centers of the brain growing smaller. But there was a relentlessness aspect to this, in that we couldn't allow the pain, the participants, and I was among a group of, the participants, we couldn't allow the pain to even get, hold on, let me gather my thoughts here. When our pain would come up, we would have to catch the pain at the very first instance it came up. And we would use this visualization exercise of watching the pain centers in our brain get smaller. And there was also meditation was part of the program. And this was an intensive. I mean, it was about, I think it was 7 weeks, 5 to 6 weeks of classes twice a week. And I really applied myself to the program, because I really wanted to give it a shot. And it did work. But what I noticed was that it took an enormous amount of energy to do this. And I have always had issues with expending energy on things. And this was true even before I had developed my chronic pain. Um, I was born early. I was born 24 weeks at 24 weeks, and this is something that's been true throughout my entire life. I've just had a really hard time sticking with things, and so I began to have just a really hard time sticking with these exercises and with these, and the program ended, and the teacher offered a support group once a month. And initially, I was going to do it, and then time got away from me. I forgot about it, and I was still in psychotherapy, and life happened, and other things came up, and I never really got to the support group, but anyways, and so that's my personal story with neuroplasticity. And I guess the way I feel about it is that it's a very powerful technique, but it's very ableist as well, because when neuroplasticity is presented to people with chronic pain. Well, let me first define ableism for those that are not familiar. So ableism is the idea that people with disabilities, and to be honest, I've gone back and forth on whether I consider my chronic pain a disability or not. Some days I do, some days I don't. But but to get back to ableism, it's the idea that chronic pain, it's the idea that in general, that those who have disabilities are less valuable to society than those who do not have disabilities. So, for example, to take like a disability that everyone would know about, like wheelchair users, they had to fight long and hard to have accommodations in society, and the ADA was passed, and that changed a lot of the ways that the physical world is laid out, so that it's more accessible to people with disability, who are in wheelchairs. There's ramps on curbs, so that there are wheelchair accessible buildings, and so that is but wheelchair people still face discrimination. They still face discrimination in society, and ableism is about counteracting that. And for chronic pain, the thing about chronic pain is that it's an invisible disability. So if you saw me walking out in the world, apart from my visual impairment, apart from the fact that I have a white cane in my hand, I look completely normal. You would not know that I was in chronic pain unless I told you. And so one of the things that chronic pain people have to deal with is stigma around it. A lot of people still believe that chronic pain people, it's all in your head, you're faking it, you're a hypochondriac, why can't you just get better, yada, 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 yada. And that's part of ableism as well. And the way I think neuroplasticity is ableist, specifically, is the way it's kind of sold to chronic pain patients, in that when a neuroplastic teacher or a pain psychologist is trying to get people in chronic pain on board with neuroplasticity, they're very Pollyannish about it. They are very they take a very Pollyanna approach, and they will often cite success stories of people who've turned their lives around, who did the neuroplastic healing work and who worked very hard and who turned their lives around. Now, I don't doubt those stories, okay? I'm not saying I doubt those stories. I'm sure those stories are true, but they they almost focus exclusively on those stories. And they might mention in the beginning that chronic pain is debilitating, that it's life altering, which is good and which is wonderful. But aside from mentioning in the beginning, right, of their spiel, that it's life altering, that it's and that it's debilitating, which it is, they 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 focus on the success stories, and they're very what I noticed about the person I worked with is that she was very aggressive in selling her program, in making her pitch. And I felt put under a lot of pressure to do the program. And when you're in chronic pain, when you're suffering from mental health issues, more pressure really is counterproductive. And I guess for me, the neuroplastic world in chronic pain, the way it's applied to chronic pain, there's a lack of humility, I would say. There's a lack of, again, it's this Pollyanna attitude that the people have they're professionals who are in this field. And I get it. When you discover something that is a scientific discovery, like neuroplasticity, you want to shout it from the rooftops. You want to relieve suffering. Suffering is difficult to watch. It's difficult to witness, but it needs to be witnessed. It needs to be witnessed. It needs to be honored. It needs to be taken seriously. And I guess I don't think that people involved in these neuroplastic programs really understand how debilitating chronic pain is. And I don't know, and one of the ways that chronic pain is debilitating is that when you have chronic pain, your body becomes unreliable. You wake up and you don't know how you're going to function. You don't know, you just don't know whether your body's going to be reliable that day. So it makes planning ahead very difficult. It makes planning ahead for getting together with friends, for doing these everyday, doing these normal tasks that a person without chronic pain can do without thinking about them. It makes those tasks and those events that should be wonderful, it makes them potentially stressful, and it can getting together with friends, if there are a lot of friends and they're noisy, it can make chronic pain worse. And I forgot to mention at the start of the video, I have another condition called hyperacusis, which is a hearing condition in which everyday noise levels are painful for me. And I consider this another chronic pain condition, even though it's not normally thought of as a chronic pain condition by professionals. It's like if noises are causing you pain, that's a chronic pain condition as far as I'm concerned. I used to be, to get back to the personal a little bit, I used to be a musician. And when I came down with hyperacusis, I tried to still create music, but I realized that I would no longer be able to be a musician. And that has been a huge loss for me. And I'm just now coming to terms with it. 10 years later, I got my hyperacusis in my early 20s, 10 years ago. And I'm just coming to terms with it. And I'm becoming comfortable being a music fan and not being a musician. And kind of having to change my role in relationship to music. And that's to say nothing of my joint pain, which also prevents me from playing the piano the way I used to. I used to be a pianist. I used to produce electronic dance music. I remember trying to use a new version of the music production software that I used, and I was fiddling with an EQ, and it just hurt. My ears just hurt, and I was like, "Wow, I'm not going to be able to do this anymore." And ironically, realizing that, I actually felt relieved. I mean, I felt very sad and disappointed, but I also felt relieved. It's like, okay, my body is saying no, Sebi, you can't do this anymore. And yeah, I am. But to get back to neuroplasticity and ableism, again, it's this Pollyanna attitude. And get my notes back here. And it erases the lived experiences of people with chronic pain. It essentially says to people in chronic pain, here's this scientific discovery we made about the brain. And if you just work hard enough, if you just apply yourself enough, you too can be free from chronic pain. And that's the implied message that's never stated out up front by neuroplastic, practitioners. But it's implied, okay? It's implied in the literature on neuroplasticity as it relates to chronic pain. And, the implication is if you can't stick with it, if you can't, if it takes too much energy, you're just not trying hard enough. You're just not working hard enough. And it upholds, I'm an American, and in our country, we have this obsession with individualism, this obsession with heroic overcoming and this idea that one's circumstances in life, that those are not, they're not they don't determine your fate. You can do anything. You hear this all the time in America, in the United States specifically. And neuroplasticity lives within that cultural framework, and people, I can tell people, people are going to say, well, you don't understand the science, you don't, but it does live within that cultural framework of extreme individualism. And in my opinion, it does. And again, it erases the lives of people in pain to a large extent. And it just, and it's ableist in that way. It doesn't, it doesn't grapple with the immense suffering that chronic pain can entail. And just to give you an idea, with my hyperacusis, for example, when it was at its worst, thank God it's improved. But when it was at its worst, I was isolated in my basement bedroom in my parents' house. I could literally not eat dinner with my parents. The clinking of the forks, the coughing or sneezing would send me into these rages because of the pain that I would feel. And I would have to eat in my mom's office. because I couldn't eat with my family. I was completely isolated. And, excuse me, by the way. And I wanted to die. I wanted to die. And I don't think that people who aren't in chronic pain really appreciate the depths of the torture that chronic pain can be. It can be like torture. When you're stripped of the life you thought you were going to have, when it's taken away from you by pain, that is a life-altering event. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. And I want to now move on to the opioid crisis. And I'm very angry at the left media in this. And so the opioid crisis, we're being told in the media that there's an opioid crisis and that people are dying of overdoses from opioid medication. And I don't doubt that this is happening. I want to be clear. I'm not saying that people who have lost loved ones to the opioid crisis are, I'm not saying that isn't a tremendous loss and suffering is entailed in that, of course, and that we need to hold these companies accountable. But what's being totally swept under the rug is the suffering this is and the impact this is having on chronic pain patients who are in severe amounts of pain, who are being told by their doctors that they have to, I can't prescribe you any more opioids because the DEA is breathing down my neck. The Drug Enforcement Administration, and doctors have been scared out of prescribing opioids for their pain patients because of this. And pain patients have died because of this. Pain patients have committed suicide because of lack of access to their pain medication. And I will be posting a documentary in the description that tackles this issue. And the documentary, I'm trying to remember what it's called. I think it's called Pain Warriors, I believe. And I'll be posting that in the description when I'm done with this video. And apart from this documentary, the only other place in the media that I've been able to find coverage of the opioid crisis as it's affected people in chronic pain has been in the right-wing libertarian media. Reason.com, a libertarian magazine, did a wonderful piece on chronic pain and the opioid crisis. And I just feel like it's completely hypocritical of the left media of places like Democracy Now! and The Atlantic and and NPR and all of these outlets, that they're not covering the impact that the opioid crisis is having on people in pain. They're focusing solely on the overdose deaths, and they're just almost completely ignoring the lack of access to medication that chronic pain patients are now experiencing. And I heard a story on NPR of an African-American woman who, and the reason I mentioned she's African-American is because Black people have historically their pain has been undertreated because of white privilege. And but she had sickle cell anemia, and she was taken off her opioids because their emergency room physician was concerned about addiction. And she was literally tortured uh, and denied access to her medication because the emergency room doctor was concerned about, addiction. And it's like, what are you doing? What are you doing taking this person off medication that they are dependent on to remain functional? And I was enraged for this person when I heard this story on NPR. I swear to God, it's like, chronic pain patients are made to feel so invisible already. Okay, it's barely covered in the media, if at all. Okay. And when it's covered, it's not seen through a disability lens. It's seen through a health lens. It's seen as something to overcome. It's seen as something. It's not seen as a life-altering disability. And I think it needs to be seen as a life-altering disability so that the world can become more accessible to people in pain. And it's not to say that neuroplastic treatment can't be part of, the solution for people with chronic pain. Okay, these treatments are very powerful, but there needs to be some humility. There needs to be some humility with the people who are providing these treatment approaches. And at the moment, I just don't see that. I just don't see that. They promise too much, is what I'm saying. They promise too much. And they make people like myself, who were not ultimately successful with them, feel ashamed about not being able to be successful. And yeah, that's I think I've covered everything I want to cover in this video. So, if you have comments, please leave them down there in the comment section. As I said, I'm going to update the description section with links to that documentary. Maybe I'll try and find that article on that African-American woman with chronic pain who was denied opioids. And I'll put just information about chronic pain, and I'll put the Wikipedia entries for chronic pain and neuroplasticity and ableism in the description. So if you want more information, you can view those Wikipedia entries. And yeah, so thank you so much for watching. And yeah, all right, catch you later.